What's up, MMA fans? I know I haven't done a video in forever, and it's been a really long time, and so much has happened, so there's really no point in recapping stuff. So much has happened since I did a video last. But, wow, and here we are, 2010. I did my first video, and I'm going to say mid to late '06. So it's been a while. I've been doing mixed martial arts videos on YouTube, and for those of you who don't know me, you know, I still have all my videos up. I have them all archived on my computer, so I'm sure many have come and gone. I know there's a lot more guys doing mixed martial arts prediction videos on YouTube now, and there's, again, so much has happened since I've done a video. I just might as well get to current stuff. Current stuff being, the card coming up with, we got a Strike Force card, a WEC card. There's a UFC every month. In this upcoming card, we have a Fight Night card that's headlined by Paul Harris and Marquardt. It was supposed to happen in Boston, but unfortunately it was an injury, so they kind of pushed the card up. I think same was with Rivera was supposed to also fight in Boston, but he never got the chance to because it was an injury with an opponent or something like that, so they moved the fight up. But it looks like a pretty good card. Marquardt and Paul Harris are basically kind of stalemated in the 185 division because, Sonnen's going to get the immediate rematch, and that just kind of seems to be the way of it. I really think the UFC made a big mistake doing that with BJ. It's just a bad matchup for BJ. It's funny how people talk about him being washed up, and it's just anybody who's watched MMA over the years knows that was the same exact way he lost to Pulver. People look and say, well, wow, he lost to Pulver. How the hell did he lose to Pulver? Any other time BJ's lost, he's lost because he was, the guy was bigger than him, whether it be Machida, whether it be Hughes, GSP. He lost because of his lack of size for 170 pounds and above. But when Pulver beat him, he used his speed, he was in and out, and he mixed in the takedowns and frustrated BJ. And it's the same thing, the same formula Edgar used, and he did it to perfection. He did it twice. I really think the UFC took a step back with the card that they did. I mean, even Tony being licensed for an MMA fight was a joke, let alone throwing him in there with Couture. And you get these crappy rankings by websites by MMA Weekly and Sherdog. Couture a top 205er now off that win. I mean, are you kidding me? It's just a joke. Lawal was up there, but he lost to Calvin Canty, most notably known as Feijao. But it's just unbelievable how they choose to rank fighters. It's more of a popularity contest, like Brock being the #1 heavyweight. It's like, this guy's got 6 fights, and there's no book on him. There really isn't. I mean, if you look at the success of the UFC heavyweight division, it's all predicated upon beating Frank Mir. If you can beat Frank Mir, you're somebody in the heavyweight division. And if you guys can remember 2-3 years back, and MMA is gaining fans constantly, and who really, they watch the sport and they hear the stuff that guys like Dana White and Joe Rogan and Goldberg and anybody else who they can get up there and talk. They're mouthpieces for the organization. They work for the UFC. They're not going to sit there and badmouth fighters who fight in the UFC because they trump up every fight. Every fight is great. All this. I mean, they talked up Tony and Couture when anybody with their right mind knew exactly what was going to happen. Couture went in with the sloppiest shot in the world, and Tony just basically sat down, and Couture crawled on top of him, and that was the fight. But if you remember, 6 years ago even, I think that was when Mir won his first title against Sylvia, and then he got the accident. He came back, he was fat, he looked unmotivated, he looked lost. got crushed against, Marcio Cruz, Pedapano, and looked horrible against Dan Christensen. Brandon Vera killed, just mopped him up, and they threw him in with Lesnar, and Lesnar was his second MMA fight. He caught him rather quickly, and all of a sudden, Mir resurrected his career off of that. He beats a staph-infected Nogueira on the show, and it's everybody's a ga over Mir. And then Lesnar comes back and just kind of smothers him and pounds him into the ground. Any other time Mir's been on the ground and getting his face hammered, and you can go back to when he lost to Ian Freeman. That was just the way Mir just doesn't, when he starts getting hit, he really doesn't respond to it well. He just kind of like, concedes into a ball. And just you look at the success of the top guys outside of, Cain Velasquez. Why does this guy's name escape me right now? It always does. Junior Dos Santos, who, everybody's in love with because he was knocking guys out. But, he got taken the distance by a pretty tough Roy Nelson. And he didn't look like the same fighter in that second round and showed a huge chink in his armor. That second and third round, that knockout power wasn't there. And that's what that was the one piece of trepidation I had about Carwin. He's just a big guy, he's a muscular guy, but he's never made it out of the first round. And I'm the biggest Brock detractor there is, trust me, but his experience in the WWE, believe it or not, I hate to say it, but helps him in these MMA matches because he was out there in a ring with another guy, often his own size, bigger, but still, and going for a half an hour straight, running, doing, athletic types of movements in front of large crowds for extended periods of time. And I think that, in turn, has helped him in the in his MMA ventures, because Carwin just went anaerobic in that second round and wasn't able to do anything. We all saw it. So, I mean, there's a lot of, that's a topic. The Velasquez-Lesnar fight is going to be an interesting fight because here, Velasquez is a wrestler, but he's got very good hands, and he is a more well-rounded fighter than Brock is. Brock's stand-up is horrible. I mean, you saw him backing up with his. He looked horrible. It just, and people talk about him as if he's got all this crazy amounts of time. I mean, he's only a couple of months older than Fedor, or younger, and Fedor's had a 10-year MMA career. And that was always boggling my mind. If the guy loses once in 10 years and all of a sudden he sucks, it would just, and I just think there's a lot of fly-by-night fans in MMA. I think there's a lot of fly-by-night people in general who have, clothing sponsors, etc., etc. We've seen them come and go, people that have claimed to be into the sport and just kind of withered away. But it's the knowledge of the sport and the love of it, that if you either have it or you don't, a lot of people tend to gravitate towards things that are in popular, flavor of the week, month, what have you, and then it's kind of like, whatever. It's a revolving door. It's like, Dana White still today saying, well, every heavyweight in my division can beat Fedor. It can beat any other heavyweight outside the UFC. Of course, because he's not promoting them. He was saying that when he was putting on heavyweight title fights with Jeff Monson and Tim Sylvia. Had to do back-to-backs with Andrei Arlovsky and Sylvia because nobody else was really in the division. Wintello, Arlovsky. He's putting on Eilers, Arlovsky. He's putting on heavyweight championship fights like that. And he was saying the same things then. Well, at that time, his big headliners were Couture and Liddell. Now, Liddell is pretty much done. The guy is punch drunk and just doesn't know it yet. It's kind of unfortunate for a guy like him. And then Couture, who's become still has a huge name, but he's a matchup guy now. I think his last legitimate matchup was the Nogueira matchup, and Vera. But to me, Vera, with that year off that he had with the contract dispute with UFC, then he split from City Boxing and his manager. He doesn't look like the same fighter that as he was at a heavyweight. And in 205, he looks obviously physically better, but he just doesn't look as explosive, as dynamic. Got destroyed against John Jones. John Jones is just, and that's how the sport's going to evolve. We're seeing these guys come out of nowhere at a very young age and just be just supernovas. You know, back then it was like the first guy we really saw do that as a young fighter come out and just kind of run through guys, good guys, and Carl Parison, Jay Heron, Nick Diaz. I'm sorry, not Nick Diaz. Was GSP. That'd be a fight I'd like to see, Nick Diaz and GSP now, because I think Nick Diaz is a much better 170-pound fighter now than he was then. And I think he's a very good 185-pounder too. I think he's just improved so much. But I'd like to see him fight better competition. In Strikeforce, I don't know if he can get that. That's why you see a Jake Shields. There's really nobody for him to match up against in Strikeforce. He's not going to fight Diaz. Come on, Jay Heron, Joe Riggs. Remember they were gonna Drew Fickett, but fortunately Fickett had a lot of personal issues from what I had read. So it's just matchups, and and there's divisions where the UFC can just provide a lot more matchups, and they put on a lot more cards. You used to see pay-per-views where you would see like, Couture and Hughes and Franklin and Liddell. You would see them almost like back-to-back pay-per-views, or a pay-per-view skip and then another consecutive pay-per-views where they would fight. Now you see them 3 times a year, twice a year, if that, the way the sport is, because there's so many fighters and there's so many cards. But that's a good thing. That means the sport's growing, it's popular. We all know this, but nevertheless, it looks like it's going to be a full winter of mixed martial arts. We love that. Strikeforce does the series, the show series on Showtime. That's a good thing to follow. The fight night coming up looks good, so we'll see what happens, MMA fans. Again, haven't done a video in a long time, I know, but again, I got a new webcam, upgraded some software on my computer, so things are a lot smoother. Just had a lot of things going on over the last year or so, but I've stayed watching the sport. Haven't stopped following it. Catch every show I can. And you both know, if you're watching this video like I do, it's a great sport. Still a boxing fan, I'll have to admit. I'm really a boxing fan too. I love boxing. It's kind of how I started watching combat sports, like all of us. Remember the first fights that ever caught my attention were just to go into a little bit of history about me, not that you care, but was in my opinion, the last great heavyweight fights in boxing. In my opinion, the last true great heavyweight fights were the Holyfield Bowe fights back in the early 90s, and that's what hooked me on boxing, was watching those fights. And then it just kind of stemmed from there. And then the first MMA fight I watched wasn't a UFC, it was a Pride. And it was, I remember it was on at like 3:34 in the morning. And it was Vanderlei Silva was one of the fights I saw, and Guy Metzger. And that was just, it was a crazy fight. And Silva ended up winning. He was very young. He was just, the crazy windmill hooks as he is now. He's down at 185 now in the UFC. I mean, Belfort. It's just crazy where all these guys have ended up. Where Belfort being like this big, thick Brazilian kid knocking out Tank Abbott, and then Couture became like the old underdog when he beat Vitor back in like '97, and here Couture still is fighting. It's just amazing how these guys, where they are now, and what they're doing. It is unbelievable. But nevertheless, MMA fans, I'll stop rambling. Hope you guys have had a good Labor Day weekend. Look forward to seeing you on. I believe the fight night is not this weekend, but next weekend. But definitely gonna check it out. And you guys have a good one and take care.